Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Frozen Heart, Fated Soul. Episode 10. Chapter 90. Kiera. I awoke feeling something poking my stomach. Apart from that, I felt so relaxed. Why did I feel so snug? I opened my eyes slowly, my heart racing when I looked at the partially tattooed chest in front of me. My breath hitched, my stomach erupted in butterflies as his familiar scent wrapped around me. Oh, goddess! How did we end up in bed together? I tensed, knowing exactly what was poking me. The realization sent a rush of pleasure through me and my entire body heated up, trying my best not to adjust my position. I didn't want to wake him up. I knew I wanted him. The mate bond, my own turmoiled emotions, and my wolf surges were threatening to drown me. Hey! Alejandro's thick voice came. What's up? No, don't look at me. I tried to move away only to feel him throb against me. My own desire was only growing, and I knew he would smell my arousal. Kill me now, goddess! I slowly looked up into his eyes, my cheeks burning with shame. Ready to be mocked. His eyes were dark, and I didn't miss the desire in them. Let go. I whispered, despite my entire body and soul urging me to push him onto the bed and kiss him. He raised a hand, running his fingers down my cheek. I knew he could hear my heart, see the reaction my body had towards him. He searched for something in my eyes, and it was at that moment that I sensed his emotions. I was so lost in my own raging hormones that I didn't even realize the chaos he was feeling. Concern filled me. I had sensed many emotions from Alejandro, but never had I sensed this level of confusion, worry, distress, and guilt. Why was he guilty? My heart twisted and I wondered if he had gone somewhere at night. Did he? No, he wouldn't. Although the thought crossed my mind, I didn't believe it. Then what was it? Calm down, he said quietly. I'm calm, what's worrying you? I asked, not missing him tense slightly. He looked away and shook his head slowly. Wouldn't he share his problem? I pulled away, feeling an ache inside. What were we? I sat up, but before I got any further, he had tugged me back into his arms. My back hit his chest, his muscular arms wrapped around me tightly from behind. My heart thudded as he buried his head into my neck. I'm sorry, he whispered. I tensed. What for? Why was he apologizing? He said he wouldn't apologize. For everything I've put you through. He murmured as if understanding my silent question. His lips grazed my neck and I let out a small whimper of pleasure. My eyes fluttered shut. His large manhood now touching my A.S.S. The urge to rub myself against him was threatening me, but before I could even argue, or do anything, he pulled me completely against him, crushing our bodies together as one. Our hearts raced as one and I didn't move. I had no idea why he felt so conflicted, but it was clear that he wasn't able to tell me. We both acted on physical attraction, we didn't really communicate, we didn't share our problems. We made choices based on our own issues. Yes, you hurt me, Alejandro. But I hurt you too. So please, stop feeling guilty for it. I whispered, despite how strongly the bond was pulling me to him. I meant those words. We had acted recklessly, deciding our own paths, making our own assumptions, and hurting the other. I knew you were my mate before the blood moon, he said, so quietly that I barely heard. My heart pounded and I pulled away, putting distance between us. You knew. I whispered, hating the fact my eyes were stinging. He sat up, a god in all aspects. I knew when I was falling for you. That you weren't just any she-wolf. And that's when I decided to stay away from you, to force myself to go ahead with the engagement. The reason I needed a distraction at the mating ball, the reason I didn't host it. He said quietly. I didn't know what to make of it. He hurt me when he knew I was his mate. That made the stinging pain worse. But at the same time, it meant he had cared for me long before the mate bond even came into effect. And the night I slept with Rayhan, he knew I was his mate. How had he felt? My eyes threatened to spill at the very thought of what I had put him through. You said you wouldn't apologize, so why now? I whispered. I felt scared, like this was goodbye. Why did it feel like this? I said I'd show you, but I don't think there is any I can ever do to make up for all the crap. He said quietly. Alejandro. What happened? You weren't like this at night. I scooted closer and cupped his face. You're scaring me. He gripped my wrists and looked at me. I knew he was struggling to say whatever it was. Tell me what it is, I urged, not missing his gaze lingering on my lips. I don't want you coming with me to the forest. You said yourself, you got a bad feeling about it. I thought you were okay with me going with you. Why change your mind now? I asked. Worry now replaced with frustration. I shoved his shoulders in annoyance. That made him smirk. Al, hey? When did we get that close? He teased. We've already linked, I don't think calling you Al will beat that. Stop changing the topic. Tell me, why don't you want me to come? Did you get some more news? Together, we could probably do a lot better. Whatever there is in that forest, my powers could be of some use. I tried to ignore the way he was stroking my waist or that arrogant smile that lingered on his face. I do have reasons. Can you not be so stubborn? He said, frowning when he realized I was not going to back down. I can and I will, I said, my eyes flashing. I knew he was hiding something from me. If I don't want to take you, I won't. He shot back. I'd like to see you try to stop me. I glared at him, staring up my most icy look I could. What are you going to do? Try to act tough? Give me baby shoves? You sure aren't that strong now, are you? He mocked. Okay, although I loved the fact he sounded like his normal, annoying self again. It was annoying. You want hard, I'll show you hard. I said, glaring at him, as I punched his shoulder harder. He was pushed back a little but still unfazed. Is that all you got, sweetheart? He taunted. Oh, he sure asked for it. Ugh, you are so annoying. I said, and this time I smacked him again, using all my force. It knocked him back onto his pillow, making me gasp. My heart skipped a beat as he pulled me along with him. I was now on top of him, my eyes widening in surprise. Never said I wasn't, he remarked. His hands that were on my waist dipped lower ever so slightly as he gripped my H.P.S. I glared at him in frustration, but despite that, I couldn't resist the way I felt, the way my core ached, the storm within me or this tension that was growing between us. Our eyes met and I was very aware of his ABS pressing against my core through the thin fabrics of my shorts and panties. My chest rose and fell, I was drowning in him and I didn't want to ever surface. You need to be careful, amor mio. Because your arousal is driving me crazy. I won't be able to control myself. He growled, his eyes flashing red. My heart thudded in my chest, but I wanted this. I leant closer, running my hands over his shoulders. Maybe I don't want you to control yourself, I whispered, my core throbbing. I didn't miss the flash of surprise on his face as I bent down, my gaze dipping to his lips, but before I could kiss him, he turned his head away, making a sharp sting of pain rush through me. Wait. I need to tell you something first, he said quietly. Alejandro, her heart thudded as she fought back her tears at my refusal. I knew she wanted to run from me but I refused to let her go. I sat up and looked down at her. Although she was in my lap, she was still so much smaller than me. She bit her lip, looking away. I placed a kiss on her forehead, inhaling her tempting scent. She was my home, the place I wanted to be, but I needed to tell her this now. I don't know if there's. I trailed off. How do I tell her that she's pregnant? Since I woke up, I knew I had to tell her, but how? Alejandro. What is it? She asked softly. What do you think of pups? I asked bluntly. She blinked, looking confused. Pups? They're cute, want to be a mama. Okay, that sounded stupid. It seemed Kiera thought so too when she blushed and let out an awkward laugh. Yet? Let's not jump the gun, she said. I didn't miss her gaze dipping to my DCK. Not the best chat-up line, yet, I was making a fool out of myself. How do I tell her? I didn't even know how to be nice. Maybe I should just do this how I usually would. I gave her a mocking smirk. I don't need to have chat-up lines ready when we both know I get you turned on without even having to try, I said arrogantly. She gave me a scornful gaze. Yeah, I can see what kind of affect I'm having on you too, she retorted. Okay, now we were going off topic. I placed my hand on her thigh, stroking it to calm her spiking temper. So, about pups. Not sure if you know or not, I'm not a werewolf, I'm a Lycan. The rules of needing to mark someone to get them knocked up don't seem to apply to me, I said. She raised an eyebrow and I took a breath. Here goes nothing. You're already pregnant, sweetheart, yet, being me was so easy. Her face drained of color as she clamped her hand over her mouth, her heart racing. Okay, now what do I do? She's going to freak out. Stop thinking with your head, Al. Just do what feels right. I let go of her waist and she tried to clamber off my lap, but I gripped her wrist, pulling her back so this time I was carrying her sideways as I wrapped my arms around her firmly. I was trying not to focus on her boobs. She sure was fine. Look. If you don't want it, we can get rid of it. It actually hurt saying those words. How could it hurt when I didn't even know of its existence until last night? I could hear her racing heart and I really wished I knew what was going through her mind. Do you want me to get rid of it? She asked quietly, placing her hand on her stomach. Well, I wasn't expecting that question. It's your body, your choice. What I want doesn't matter, I said without even having to think. Yeah, I'd love to say keep it, but I had to remember she was only 18. Although it was common for our kind to have kids early, I still wanted her to be ready for it. We were already going, and now we were adding a pup to the mix, just to make matters worse. Kiera, I couldn't think straight. From the moment he said I was pregnant, I had gone into shock. Did he want it? I knew instantly that I would never get rid of it, or even consider harm to come to it. I felt a warm fuzzy feeling fill me up before I asked him if he wanted me to get rid of it. My choice, I said after he replied. Do you want pups? I couldn't bring myself to look at him. Before? Not really. Yours, yet. But what I want shouldn't influence your decision, he said in his same arrogant tone. One I realized with time just hit his real emotions. So, if I were to keep it, you would support me? I asked, trying to calm my pounding heart. His arms tightened around me. All the way, he said huskily, resting his forehead against the side of my head. I looked up at him, my nose brushing his, making my heart pound. Although I knew the sheer reality of me being pregnant hadn't settled in, his words had. He was making my heart melt with every small action he did. The memory of him and Jasmine felt so small compared to everything we had. I needed to just move on from it all, and I think I could. I caressed my stomach, unable to believe that I had a life in there. My baby, our baby. I looked up at him, paying attention to his short beard, his angled jaw and the arrogant pout that was always on his face. His onyx eyes were so dark you could barely differentiate the pupil from the iris. I forgive you, I whispered, completely. I want to move on from it all. I want to be with you, Alejandro. There, I said it. Now it all depends on if he forgives me. I could hear his heart racing, his eyes full of surprise at my words, and something else that made my stomach flutter. Do you forgive me? I asked softly. I saw concern settle in his eyes as he cupped my face in his calloused hand, caressing my cheek with his thumb. His intense gaze made my stomach flutter like crazy. There's nothing to forgive. But I don't want this pup to influence your decision, he said seriously. It's not, I said quietly as he looked away. Suddenly I realized that regardless of if I forgave him or not, it seemed he needed to forgive himself first. I don't think I've earned that yet, he said quietly. I hurt you too. Al, please, he cut me off, his thumb rubbing against my L.P. You should think over this decision too. A pup can be hard. I know you want to keep it, but don't rush your decision, he said, his gaze was fixed on my lips. My heart was pounding. I know, but I'm sure you know by now that I make decisions very fast, and once I do, I don't back off, I said, now resting my head on his shoulder. Life was so full of surprises, and one thing was clear, everyone's story was different. I just hoped would get my happy ending too. I know. But I think we've both made enough rash decisions to learn to actually sit back and just think first for once. Can't believe I'm saying this, he said, making me smile. Oh yeah? When did the mighty Lycan king get so wise? I teased, looking up at him. When he fell in love so hard, that all he sees is his queen, he said quietly, his eyes now meeting mine. Kiera, my heart thudded as he said those words. He loved me. He loves me. Oh, goddess! I couldn't reply when he suddenly kissed me, sending off strong currents of delicious sizzling sparks. A kiss that expressed everything that couldn't be put into words. My stomach fluttered as I wrapped my arm around his shoulder and kissed him back. Leisure consumed me. I could feel his desire, his want and his love for me. The honey taste of his mouth mixed with his scent was the perfect drug to make me high. We need to stop, he said, breaking away from me. Why? I asked, feeling my heart race. I wanted this because now isn't the right time. I want you, amor mio. Trust me, way more than I could ever tell you. But we need to take it slow. I don't want to end this up. Not more than I already have. Since when did he care? I frowned, about to give a snarky reply when I realized, he was trying, for me. Even if I didn't agree with him putting a stop to us, I could see the strength he'd needed to refuse me. His grip on my PS was slightly painful. His eyes were flickering from red to black, the hunger for me clear in them, but he still fought it. I don't want our pup to be the reason for your forgiveness, that's something I need to earn, he said, his hand now cupping my neck. He would one day mark me. I forgive you though, I said softly. He smirked arrogantly. Does my girl want something? He asked. His words alone sent a rush of leisure through me. Yes, you, I said, pouting. One day soon, amor mio. I swear. I'm yours, he said, kissing my lips softly. My heart pounded at those words. I could see the love in his eyes and it felt overwhelming. This felt like a dream. Letting go of my neck, he kissed me in the corner of my mouth. I gasped at the sudden move, but that soon changed to a soft sigh as his hand continued going lower. Alejandro, I whispered. Yeah, he murmured, his fingers slipping into the band of my shorts. What RNH? Feeling the growing knot in my stomach, the pressure building as I got closer and closer to my release. I could see his eyes darken with desire and a low growl escaped him. Soon I felt myself nearing, he said, his lips brushing my ear. I smiled, feeling so content. I just wanted to sit here and do nothing forever. Alejandro. Yeah. I love you, I whispered, feeling his heart rate quicken. I did, I truly meant it. I didn't have the courage to say it before. But if he was able to, then why shouldn't I? I loved him and that was all that mattered. His hold on me tightened as he inhaled my hair. He tilted my head back and that rare small half-smile crossed his face, sending my heart exploding. Only someone as caring as you could love a monster, he said, A slight flicker of sadness filled his eyes, but it was gone as fast as it had come. I shook my head. No. You are not a monster, and as much as I hate to mention her at this time, I'm not the only one who has loved you. There are a few who have fallen for our king. They love the concept of power and being queen, not me. You're the only one I want though, he said, a small frown on his face. The only one I'm scared to lose. You won't lose me, I'm already in danger. I'm probably safest with you, I said, giving him a wild smile. I hope so, he replied softly, before burying his head into my neck once more. I closed my eyes, letting myself savor this sweet moment. We stayed silent and I knew he'd refuse me if I offered him the favor in return, so I simply snuggled against him, enjoying the warmth peeking through the gaps in the curtain. The calmness, the sound of his heart, the warmth of his body and his scent all soothed me. I was almost dozing off when he spoke. The witch knew about your pregnancy. She said the necklace would conceal. That pendant masks the heartbeat, I checked last night. He said, reaching for it. Really? I asked, now sitting up. Guess you will have to keep it on. He said, I wonder if this was how the witch concealed herself. I remarked, now looking at his tattooed chest. I wanted her. Enjoy every inch of the god before me. Probably so. So, want to share how you ended up on the bed? I asked. He raised his eyebrow. You told me to join you, he said, smirking. I knew for a fact that no matter how much I wanted to deny it, he wasn't one to lie. So, I simply rolled my eyes, feeling so content. I loved everything about him, right down to his attitude. I leaned over and kissed his lips softly. I don't know how I'm going to tell Dad about this. I mean, Mom knows we did the deed, but Dad... I cringed at the very thought. Oh, goddess! Dad, he let out a throaty chuckle. Now this is going to be fun. Allow me to do the honors, he said, looking at me with a devilish smirk that would put even Hades to shame. He was going to enjoy it, I could tell from that glint in his eyes. One thing I knew for a fact was that Alejandro loved to annoy Dad off, and this was one thing I was sure Dad was not going to be pleased with. Help me, goddess! For surely I'm screwed. Alejandro, I'm going to just admit that I was on cloud 9 hearing those words from her, feeling her soft, slender hands wrapped around me. She was mine, and although she refused to return home and was adamant about continuing this journey, I couldn't stay annoyed with her. She was strong and she didn't need me to suffocate her like her dad and brother did all her life. She was a queen, with or without me, and yet I was worried about her, but I'd be there with her. I won't let come to her or pup. Yeah, that was still hard to get my head around, but I was sure trying. We had showered, eaten, and were now back on the road. Kiera was quieter, but I often saw her placing her hand on her stomach, smiling ever so slightly. That confused me. How was she so happy already? In a perfect world, having a pup way later would have been ideal. But nothing about this world was perfect or ideal. I know I'm already 34 and I know some would say it's time, but I could have waited a few more years. Let her get to that place where she was ready and happy. I've linked her up in more ways than one. Maybe I needed to show I cared in some physical way that didn't involve pinning her against the wall and her. Maybe do some mushy crap that girls liked. The very thought made me internally cringe, but I wanted to give her that fairy tale night that I destroyed on the blood moon. Give her a memory to cherish. I looked at her. It seemed like she was going to join the small group that called me that. What do you think you will find in this forest? There's a high chance it's their main hideout, I said, frowning. She looked surprised. Then why go alone? Better chance to get in unnoticed. My aim is to see if I can gather any more intel before planning an attack. There's a chance we'll get caught. She said, frowning. Yeah, but I didn't want to sacrifice countless men without even knowing what's there. With the new knowledge, I'm hoping I can get to the Rogue King. If he gets it, maybe I can show him we are not the enemy, and if that doesn't work then we kill him. Rogues don't follow anyone, they got them listening. If he's dead, it'll unravel that army. Besides, I'm a Lycan, I usually work alone. Werewolves all submit to my command somewhat, well, all but you. And if the witch is there? She asked. Guess we'll see when we get there. Promise me one thing, if I tell you to run, you will. I said, now dead serious. Her heart thudded. I already have a bad feeling about it. I can't abandon. Promise me, Kiera, I said dangerously. We were going into the unknown, and I knew the risks were high. I also knew that if worse came to worse, I could buy her enough time to run. How can you expect me to promise you? Fine, if not for me, do it for the pup, I said quietly. I saw the hurt and fear in her eyes. I have a way to alert Darien if goes wrong and they will come for you. But why does this feel like you know things won't go light? She shouted, her eyes flashing a dazzling purple. Look, it's a witch. I don't know what to expect. You heard that spell bag, if you're caught, going to get way worse. I need you safe. Amor mio, don't make this harder for me. Please. She looked down. So. You're asking me to leave you in danger and run? She said, could you do that if I asked you to? Why did she have to turn that back on me? You're pregnant. I said firmly. I won't die so easily. It's just easier for me if I'm alone. So worse comes to worst, if I say run, you run. A lie, pregnant or not, I didn't want her to get hurt or risk her getting killed. She sighed but didn't answer me. I reached over, taking her hand in mine, kissing her knuckles softly. I wouldn't go down that easily. But I needed to be ready for. We had stopped for lunch and picked up some food for later as well. Although we could eat raw meat in wolf form, I wasn't sure if Kiera would be up for that. I was glad she was in early stages of pregnancy, meaning she could shift. Usually, she-wolves wouldn't be able to shift after the 10-week mark. So, if she needed to run she could. With her ankle, I just hoped she'd be okay. I had seen how her purple aura seemed to help her when we fought the Wendigos, and although she seemed to be channeling and using her powers well, I didn't want to take risks. I just had to hope for the best. We had reached the forest a few hours later and I parked up on the outskirts of a human town nearby. We got out of the car after applying anti-scent spray. It didn't work for me as I could still smell her perfectly. It was the same with any of my men, but apparently it worked well for normal werewolves. I took up a backpack containing a few bits that might come in handy and turned to face Kiera. "I got this made for you," I said, holding out a foot-long staff made of the strongest steel I could get my hands on. The center had a leather grip, right next to a button. I held it out as she looked at it curiously. Pressing the button and allowing the two slim but very sharp spears to be extracted. At full height, it was about 6 feet. I had asked for this to be made before we even had X. I had thought it was ideal for her to carry if anything happened. She couldn't really walk around with a staff. She almost dropped it before she smiled. Her eyes shone as she spun it. "Oh wow! Wait, you got this made just for me?" "No, for Selene," I stated, crossing my arms. She rolled her eyes as she tested it on the ground. "It's strong and sturdy," she said as she spun it. She threw it up and caught it. "And sharp enough to slice your fingers off, so careful," I said. She nodded, brushing her finger over it as she admired the craftsmanship. "It's made of the strongest metal out there, I hope you like it," I said. She looked up at me and smiled. She pressed the button as she closed it and walked over to me, locking her arms around my neck. This feeling. It felt foreign yet so perfect. I pulled her close, the tingles felt so good. I could get used to this. "I don't like it, I love it," she said, her fingers grazing my neck as she tugged me down and kissed my lips deeply. I kissed her back, my hand squeezing her ASS and making her press herself into me. We kissed hungrily, both wanting more, and I lifted her up by her perfect behind, making her M0AN. I loved how she fought for dominance as I ravished her mouth, slamming her against the car. She gasped, but I knew I wasn't that rough. She looked up at me, her eyes a vibrant purple. "You like being rough, hey?" she asked, twisting her hand painfully into my hair. A pain I relished. "We both know you liked it," I said huskily, wrapping one hand around her neck. "So, tell me, who do you best?" Question, but I wanted to hear it. Her heart hammered as she looked me straight in the eye. "You already know the answer to that," she whispered. I smirked. Now that was what I liked to hear. "I still want to hear it," I said, tightening my hold. I wanted to forget everything. Even if I was trying, it wasn't easy. You are all I want, now and forever." Kiera, we had been walking for a while, and with each step, the ominous feeling had only grown. The forest was approaching and the darkness that I felt from it made me sick to my stomach. "You okay?" Alejandro asked. "There's darkness here, Al. A lot of it. We shouldn't have come here, not alone. Something was at work here and it wasn't good. I can sense that much." "Is it magic?" "Magic that has already embedded deep in this forest. I can't see any visible remaining magic from here anyway," I said as he took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine as we continued. The closer we got to the forest, the worse the feeling got. Things were not going to go well. I knew deep down that whatever we found would be something neither of us was prepared for. I just wish I knew more. "Alejandro. Kiera. Do you want to QO back?" I can get you to safety first," he said, looking at me with a deep frown on his face and concern in his eyes. There was no way I was going back. I needed to stay with him. I shook my head. I wasn't scared, I just knew something bad was ahead. We walked through the dense forest, over thick tree roots, and I had to ignore the pain that shot up my ankle. I knew my aura did help me with that pain, but I couldn't use it here and risk the chance of getting caught. I think I needed to get my training regime back in place when we got back, and I needed to learn to channel this power without the chance of attracting a swarm of Wendigos. "All right, get on my back, I'm going to run," he said, his eyes glowing red. "What is it?" I whispered, as he turned and crouched, allowing me to grab onto his back. I wrapped my legs around his waist, inhaling his intoxicating scent. "Wolves," he replied, making my heart thud as he broke into a run that took my breath away. He was fast. His speed was quicker than even what we could do in wolf form. Maybe I was worrying for no reason. I closed my eyes, seeing if I could pick up anything past the rush of wind in my ears. But there was nothing that I could hear. He stopped suddenly, crouching down. I tried to listen but heard nothing. "We've found something," he whispered slowly, lowering his voice to barely a whisper. It was then I heard paws padding along, the crunch of leaves or gravel under their feet. Then came the faint smell of rogues and the putrid rotting smell of a man-angle. "Make sure it's tied," someone barked. Alejandro placed a finger to his lips, telling me to remain calm. There was the sound of scuffling, thudding and some roars along with growls before I heard the chilling shriek of the beast. "Careful!" the same man growled. I guess they didn't have a mind link between them, considering they were all rogues. That would be one advantage for us later. But then again, right now, neither did we. I looked at Alejandro, who was observing them, before he motioned me to follow. We crept closer, remaining out of sight. Soon the sounds and footsteps were all fading away. "There's a cavern entrance ahead. It's barely noticeable and pretty narrow. Let's follow," he said. Opening the bag he was carrying, he took out 2 large vials. "What are those?" "Sleeping gas, works perfectly on werewolves. If I use these, I need you to cover your nose and hold your breath for 30 seconds. He said, shoving them into his pockets. I nodded slowly. I knew Alejandro had weapons crafted to kill the beasts and many other things, but looking at him like this reminded me of hunters. They were practically non-existent here in the United Kingdom, but from stories I've heard, there were places where hunters were a lot stronger, who hunted our kind relentlessly, and they used weapons similar to what Alejandro was holding. "That's a good idea," I said. He gave me a cold smirk. "I have fought alone for most of my life. I used to help RAF at times if the job looked good, but as a Lycan, werewolves can't really keep up. Weapons and devices like these against those who are the best to help get the job done faster," he said, now standing up. "I see," I said, ready to do this. He looked down at me, now cupping my neck with one hand, sending a shiver of pleasure through me. "Remember what I said. If I say run, run," he said huskily. "Okay. If I felt staying was better, I would stay." I reached up and locked my arms around his neck, pulling him closer. He let go of my neck, snaking his arm around my waist instead and pulling me into him. Our bodies crushed together as our lips met in a passionate, deep kiss. My eyelids fluttered shut as I melted into him. I would never be able to get enough of this. I felt him throb against my stomach and I moved back slightly breathless. Getting turned on? I teased. Can't blame me, I live on X. When you're teasing me by just being in the same space, what did you think would happen? He said, his eyes trailing over my body. Well, enjoy, because you're the one who refused me. I said smugly, licking my lips slowly. The next thing I knew, I was being pushed against the tree, with Alejandro kissing me roughly. I couldn't even breathe at the speed of his assault on my mouth and lips. I gripped his shoulders, trying to ignore his hard shaft pressing against me. I moaned softly, doing my best to keep my voice low, despite the dizzying effect of the delicious sparks that rushed through me. My core throbbed and I knew he'd smell my arousal. I wanted him so badly. Love, do you want me to make your brains out, right here? He growled, squeezing my throat. I moaned, the move only added to how turned on I was feeling. I wouldn't mind that, I said breathlessly. Oh goddess, he was messing with my head. I just wanted him. Was this crazy? I mean, we were at the enemy's doorstep and all I wanted was to feel him between my legs. I assure you, the moment I decide to ravage you, I will not stop, not even when you scream for mercy. I told you I'm a monster. And I meant it. I'll be you like a beast. His free hand massaged me between my legs and I felt my cheeks burn as a sigh escaped my lips. I already knew he was a beast when it came. I can't wait, I said breathlessly, watching his eyes flicker from red to black. He gave me an arrogant smirk. You were made for me. Mio. He kissed my lips before forcing himself back. I smiled, hearing those words from his lips just made me feel so special. I took a deep breath to clear my head, the tension that had seemed to overcome us now dissipating as we both focused on exactly where we were. Right, let's get this done, he said, glancing through the trees as the setting sun cast shadows through the forest. He held his hand out to me and I took it with a smile as he picked up his backpack and we snuck towards the entrance. I wonder what we'd find inside. Alejandro, we moved silently. The darkness within the cavern surrounded every corner, and more than that, I could feel the evil that lingered. I kept a tight hold on her hand, my eyes, ears, and nose keeping a sense out for the smallest sound. There were several tunnels branching off and even some doors. The further down we went, the more the place seemed to get deeper. It was a maze in here. The only problem was if Kiera had to escape. I tried not to think of that, but this place was confusing. The magic is getting stronger, she whispered to me. I could sense the chilling darkness that was growing with every step, and it wasn't due to the cold air that surrounded us. The sounds of growls and shrieks soon caught my ears. I slowed down as the noise only got louder. Slowing down further when the smell of manangles and wendigos filled my nose, we were getting closer to them. We turned a corner and I stopped as I looked at the lines of cages that were built into the stone. Each one held a wendigo or manangle. There were loads, I could see how the halls branched off in several places, and each one led to more cages. If these were ever released at once, I didn't even want to think of that. I frowned at the very thought. Kiera leaned closer, her lips brushing my ear, sending a shiver of pleasure through me. "Shall I heal them?" she whispered. "No. We can't risk your powers being sensed," I murmured back. For all I knew, they already knew we were here. Although I was reigning in all my aura, there was still a chance. The biggest was the fact we were able to walk in so easily. We continued silently until I saw the faint glow of light from somewhere far ahead and stopped. The very faint murmur of voices made me strain my ear. I needed to get slightly closer. I inched closer until the sounds began to make sense. I knew Kiera wouldn't be able to hear, but I couldn't risk those hearing us either. "Ong!" A voice that I recognized spoke. I frowned. What was happening? How? "Calm down. We had a deal." A deeper voice growled. I could sense the power from him, and I wondered if this was the Rogue King. "A deal that cost me greatly. You promised me revenge. But all I got was the loss of my beloved." The man sobbed. "You will get the revenge you seek. Be patient." The deeper voice came. "When? Who more can I lose?" I clenched my jaw, anger filling me, and it took my all not to snap. I felt Kiera's hand soothingly caress mine. I knew she sensed my anger, although she had no idea what was being said. "There is a lot you can lose, Alpha. This is all for the greater cause. Do you really think the Lycan will allow you to live and rule your pack? He doesn't care who dies. He doesn't care for any of us. I know. I want to make another deal with you." A deep guttural growl echoed around us, and I knew Kiera probably heard that. "Making deals with me? Know your place," he hissed. "You weren't even able to do as I asked." "That's not true, I have done it. Despite everything, I still did my part. The pack is completely destroyed. The news will reach the Lycan King very soon." "What pack?" This didn't make sense. What was their plan? "Good. Do not address him as a king, he is just a mutation. A defect. I am the true king." The man growled. So, my assumption was correct. This man was definitely the Rogue King. I was the one king, not because I was a Lycan, but because I enacted a law and established order. Since my reign, pack fights and deaths have been fewer. I've even offered rogues a pack to join. "Why, yes, of course. Please, I have a deal I want to put forth," the Alpha pleaded. My anger was only growing. How many snitches did I have around me? What did the Rogue King offer that was better than what he already had? I had treated him well despite his family's past. "What do you want?" the would-be king spat. At least we had that in common, no patience for them. The blessed wolf. May I take her as my mate? My eyes flashed, and I would have gone and tore them to shreds if Kiera's arms didn't wrap around my waist. I knew she was only acting on my emotions. How dare they even think that Kiera would be theirs? She was mine, only mine. If anyone thought that she'd be with someone else, then they were in for a disappointment. A raucous laugh echoed down the halls. "You? A pathetic, Useless alpha! Why do you think you deserve her? Seleni's blessing will be mine. With her by my side, I'll be recognized as the true king. If you want to even be recognized as an alpha, then you better obey me." But a menacing growl rumbled off the walls, and Teehee Alpha went silent. I frowned. How much power did he have that he could make an alpha submit? Is she ready to do her part? The king hissed. She is. She won't fail us. The alpha said, sounding broken and defeated. But I didn't have 1 ounce of remorse for him. When I got my hands on him, I was going to destroy him completely and disband his pack. The son of a coward seemed to clearly be a coward too. And who did they mean by she? I doubted it was the witch. It was at that moment that Kiera tugged me. Her eyes were wide and her heart was racing. I got so distracted I didn't even realize. "The witch is near," she whispered. I knew a witch would sense us, regardless of how much our scent was disguised. Witches didn't need noses to catch something. My gaze flickered to the metal chain tucked into Kiera's top. A sliver of concern for my pup filled me. I pulled her close, placing my hand on her stomach fleetingly. I didn't want her to know. I was worried about them both. This feeling was foreign. My heart thudded as I wrapped my arms around her tightly, inhaling her intoxicating hazelnut scent before I moved back. "Time to get this done," I murmured, wrapping my arm around Kiera's waist. I lifted her off the ground, startling her as I broke into a run, heading straight towards the voices. In a flash, I was there, dropping Kiera to her feet. Immediately she had her staff in hand, pressing the button to expand it, readying herself. I stared at the 2 men before me. One I had never seen before, but he was strong. The aura of an alpha surrounded him, despite the distinct scent of a rogue, and what the most was that he looked familiar. Too familiar for comfort. But first, I snapped my gaze towards the other werewolf. "Alpha Jake!" I spat venomously as Kiera gasped, looking at the man who had been cowering on the floor. In panic or on instinct, who knows, Jake lunged at us. Kiera's aura wrapped around her, but I didn't want to deflect him. There was only one thing he deserved. Death. I ripped his neck clean off his body and tossed him aside like he was nothing, before he even had a chance to realize what had happened. He was dead. My eyes now returned to the man before me. The king's shock vanished, his dark eyes flashing a brilliant gold as he growled. "Well, looks like the fake king has made his appearance," he hissed resentfully. "I'm the one and only king. Remember that." I growled back. "One who cares for no one but himself." I could sense the sinister darkness approaching. I needed to do this fast before she came. If the other witch's assumption was correct, Andorra could be manipulating the rogue king. "Look, I know we've never met, but I'm here to help. We came to help cure the Wendigos willingly. We don't need to fight," I said urgently. This wasn't my style, but as a king, I knew what came first. "You don't want to help, I know how you work," he said coldly. My eyes flashed. "You don't know us." I never knew I could reverse the process, but when we realized I could, we came here. Kiera added, sincerity clear in her eyes. It seemed she knew how to play along well. But I also knew she wanted to help. Does it look like she's lying? I asked coldly. The sound of heels against the stone floor made me tense. She was here. I saw Kiara's color drain. I knew it was the effect of the magic. Magic that even I could feel so strongly now. It was pure darkness. Even the darkest of beasts never carried so much evil. My blood ran cold as the scent of the witch hit my nose. The smell of a witch, but mixed with that, was a scent I knew. I turned slowly, my heart slamming against my ribs as the woman finally entered the cavern. Her long black hair was woven into a braid over her left shoulder, her tanned skin contained several rune marks covering her left cheek, neck, and hands. Her dark chocolate-colored eyes glittered as they met mine. I stepped back as a storm of emotions crashed down on me. Shock, confusion, and disbelief mixed with so many more I couldn't make out. I felt suffocated. How was this possible? It's been a long time. Her strong, warm voice echoed off the walls. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to make sense of this. I couldn't form a sentence, and it wasn't because of the darkness she had brought with her. I managed one word, my voice coming out hoarse and thick, laced with utter disbelief. Mom. Alejandro. I didn't even register Kiara's gasp as I placed my arm around her waist, holding her close. I stepped back, placing distance between the Rogue King and I as I stared at the woman before me. It was her. Yet it wasn't. I didn't know what to think. That day, coming to and seeing those body pieces spread across the floor. Her hand. Her ring. The guilt that I had killed her. I didn't want to believe it. The woman I remembered as my mother was nothing like the woman before me. She was kind, sweet, loving. Raphael reminded me of her, a lot. Not only did I feel like my whole life was a lie, but it meant that even before her death, she couldn't have loved me. Or she wouldn't have made me go through that. Through the pain and shock, I was feeling the stark truth that she had faked her death, and it hit me like a hard slap across the face. She had let me live with the guilt that I had murdered her. Because of that, I was afraid to be around those I cared for. I told myself I didn't care. Shut everyone off. My heart was pounding, and if it wasn't for Kiara's presence, I don't know what I would have done. All I know is if she hadn't done that, I wouldn't have become so closed off. I had still killed the man who angered me, but not the mother I loved. Or should I say the mother I thought I loved? It seems I didn't even know her. Alejandro. She spoke, a smile on her face. It made me sick. Despite her scent being familiar, I realized that I couldn't smell her wolf. Did she sacrifice it for power? Just the way she had done for the women at Zidane's pack? Don't stand there and call my name as if nothing happened. I spat coldly, my aura fully unleashed as it filled the room like a blanket. I saw the flash on the rogue's face at the level of my power. Yet, he may be strong, but I was stronger. It was all for a cause, Alejandro. You have become the man I wanted you to become, she said, stepping closer. I saw Kiara's aura flare around her. Stay away, she growled. The power emanating from her was strong. It was blazing around her, but unlike last time when I couldn't even get close, it wasn't affecting me. Sure, I felt the pressure, but it wasn't fighting against me. I watched the witch, not sure if I should call her Endora or Mathild because would never address her as mom again. She lost that right the moment she played dead. I guess I'll go by her real name. She paused, and I didn't miss her tense at Kiera's power. I am talking to my son, a son whose mate turned out to be most ideal, she said, her eyes traveling over Kiera. If you even for one moment think that I'd ever side you, then you are delusional. I spat. All these years you've been alive, she smiled slightly. I had to do what was needed, she said, her eyes glinting. The story the witch had told us about her past flashed through my mind. She had always been a hybrid. But she kept it hidden. How? Concealment spell? Probably. What is your plan? I growled. To restore the correct king. The rogue spoke. I looked at him, feeling my stomach twist. I knew where this was going. Alejandro. Meet your brother, Marcel. Kiera gasped as I looked at him. Yeah, I was kind of expecting that. He looked a lot like Dad. And Raphael. I don't even know what to make of this. I don't get what's going on. The rogue, or should I say, Marcel said. Endora smirked slightly. Her eyes glowed and I felt the darkness growing. You need not think. She whispered, her voice seeming to come from every corner of the room. Kiera tensed as I watched Marcel's eyes glaze over. So, he was partially under her control. So, this is what you've done to your own son? Made him into a puppet? I've waited for far too long to let anything stand in my way. Alejandro. Together we can rule more than just this country. She said. Yeah, I knew once I was alone I'd feel this betrayal, but right now. I was annoyed. Oh yeah? What's your plan then? I asked venomously. Kiera, I was shocked when Alejandro said Mom. The woman he had been beating himself up about killing was still alive, and worse, she was the one who was behind it all. I could sense his emotions. He was in turmoil, despite how his facial expression seemed just annoyed off, I could sense the storm brewing within him. I held on to him, hoping that it helped somehow. Now looking at Marcel, I could see how much he looked like Raphael. They looked around the same age as well. My plan? If it's appealing, will you side me? Endora asked, her eyes glimmering red as she looked at Alejandro. I could feel her magic seeping closer. It seemed she didn't know the extent to my ability. Even I didn't, but I would just watch for now. Depends, Alejandro said. I knew he was smooth enough, but I saw from the small hint of a smirk on Endora's lips she wasn't stupid. You have turned into a fine man, Alejandro. She said, now playing with an amulet around her neck. Was that the one Janina wanted? I wonder what it does. Yeah, depends on what angle you look at that. He growled. What about Dad? Is he dead or is he alive? You killed your father, Alejandro. My mate, her eyes glimmered with tears that were utterly fake. I could feel her aura, and sense her emotions, and my annoyance was growing. Don't really care. He was a sick. Alejandro said. Yes, of course. Endora agreed. No, he wasn't. I looked at her sharply. She had made him that way. I was sure of it. It was one of those things I could just sense. Alejandro frowned. Fine. So, what's your plan, and who is he? Like, how did you have another son no one knew of? Raphael's younger twin. I was told by a seer witch that my second-born would be a power that could rival anything. A child who would be powerful beyond measure, a king of our kind, one who would create his own kingdom and rule us all. I misunderstood it and thought it meant Marcel. She meant my second pregnancy, not my second child. Sadly, he was just an average alpha. I didn't miss the bitterness in her voice. So, you raised him to be a wannabe king. He spat. Your father thought he died in childbirth and that was the plan, then when you were born. I didn't think much of it, waiting for Marcel to become what prophecy foretold. A king that I trained him to be. Wouldn't Dad have sensed the bond of a second son? I'm a witch, Alejandro, a hybrid. It isn't hard to cut a pack link and your father simply thought his son died. Her tiny smile faded. But then you were such a strong pup and I realized that the prophecy was meant for you. I couldn't take you away from the pack as your birth had drained me of most of my magic. I was weak for years after, only hoping that I could keep my witch side a secret. I needed to leave to grow and regain my powers. By certain means, I knew that she probably meant dark magic. The world had a balance. Her birthing Alejandro and her powers diminishing were probably meant to be, but she was working against the very rules and law of nature. So that's why no one knew, and Dad never realized your truth. Alejandro asked coldly. No, she said. Lie. I knew that one was a lie. She had probably bewicked him too. A sudden thought came to me and I frowned. Did she instigate her mate against Alejandro, so he would begin to feel hatred towards his own son? To make Alejandro become hateful? Even though it was just an assumption, I was sure I could be right. It would fit right in. So, why did you fake your death? Alejandro spat icily. Like I said, a cause. To make you stronger, to show you who you are. So, when the time was right, I would return and show you where you truly belong. We can rule together. Over all races. The wolves, the witches, and the vampires. With you, a Lycan leading us, the use of a blessed one, and I, one of the strongest witches in the world, we can become a force beyond reckoning. Kiera, you're crazy. Alejandro said icily. She frowned slightly, her eyes glimmering. I let my aura out, allowing it to swirl around our feet, keeping her dark magic at bay. I wasn't sure if I could fight her off, but I could try. I was working purely on instinct here. One thing was clear, she was derailing Alejandro's mind, trying to get into it and manipulate him. Not only by words, but magic was at work here too. He was strong but I had to still be careful. So, you won't help me? She asked, her face turning angrier. No. I'm not your son, nor your puppet. You've been accountable for so many lives lost. Do you think I'd ever agree? Other countries know about me, they are setting up similar councils. We don't need to do anything more. When it comes to witches, do whatever you want. But do not for 1 second think I'd ever forgive you for all the crap you put me through. I almost gave my mate up because of you." He growled, his eyes blood-red and his claws elongating. I felt the pure rage and anger rolling off him. "Alejandro, don't make a rash decision. One way or another, I have worked far too hard to let you or anyone else mess with my plans. I gave you the option to stand by my side, but if you wish to deny it, then it is your loss." She hissed. So, her true colors were coming out. I glanced at Marcel. We could show him the truth. He was just a pawn. Could I undo the magic on him just as I was able to reverse the Wendigo mutation? There was only one way to find out. "You're messed up," Alejandro growled at his mother. I stepped back slowly, letting go of Alejandro's arm. Instantly Andora's eyes snapped to me. I ignored her, pretending I was just engrossed in her words as I hugged Alejandro, slowly inching around him and leaning my head on his other shoulder. She looked away from me, glaring at Alejandro. "I am doing what is our right. We are from the purest werewolf blood, Alejandro. From the very line that the first Lycan was born of. This is our birthright." Her voice sounded slightly unearthly and I felt the wave of power coming closer. I made sure to keep my own aura pressed against it. Whatever she was trying to do to Alejandro was not going to happen. Not under my watch. "I'm going to have to burst your bubble then. I will never side with you. Not now. Not ever," Alejandro said quietly. "Alejandro. If you are certain, then I will unleash upon every pack of wolves out there," she said. "And I will be there to stop you," he said quietly, as I reached behind me and touched Marcel's arm, slowly channeling my power while maintaining a protective aura around us. It was clearly working as a barrier, keeping Andora's magic away from us, but doing both was proving harder than I thought. "Let me ask you 3 questions. Answer them honestly," he said quietly. "I owe you nothing, Alejandro. If you do not wish to side with me of your own free will, then I will make sure you do by force," Andora said coldly. "Answer me first. Then do whatever you want," he said coldly. "What do you want to know?" she asked just as coldly. It seemed his refusal had completely blinded her, and she was so angry she wasn't even paying attention to me. I felt the magic seep away from Marcel, but it took a chunk out of me. I felt tired, like I had just trained for a few hours. I knew when the effect drained off, he would come back, but I wasn't sure if he'd realize Andora was in the wrong. "Why did Dad hate me?" Alejandro asked quietly. I motioned discreetly to Marcel not to move, hoping he understood. "You are born to be hated, and to rule. No one will ever love you, Alejandro," Andora said snidely. "That's not true," I answered icily, making her attention snap to me. I instantly wished I hadn't spoken. If she told Alejandro the truth that I had assumed, then it would just hurt him even more. Humph, well maybe not. Perhaps I influenced him on how to behave. I tried to do it with Raphael, but the boy seemed immune to spells. I guess he inherited some of my abilities. She spat resentfully. "So, you're saying you made Dad say all that? You made him dislike me?" Alejandro said, his heart racing at the revelation. My heart was breaking for him, I wanted to take away all his pain. All for a good cause, Alejandro. Endora taunted. Now what else do you want to know? Jake. Why did he side with you? Oh, that Pac owed me a life debt, and we witches always collect. His father worked for me and never repaid that debt, so Jake had to, but the fool was utterly useless. She spat. I frowned, I never sensed evil from him. But then again, I only met him fleetingly. Perhaps he was just forced into this. We would never know. But for him to have been a part of this plan all along, made my blood run cold. Her power was growing and I knew she was just buying time too. Alejandro seemed too stunned to even say anything. His turmoil-filled emotions were swirling around him. I decided to take over. I had a plan to get Marcel on our side, but for that he needed to hear the full truth. Why did you lie to Marcel about the Wendigos and Manangle, when you were the one who created them? I asked. You stupid! Why do you think? It was all for the cause. When I have you, just wait to see, she laughed mockingly. What I create? An entire army of Wendigos. I will rule alone, I need nothing or no one. She spat. Alejandro growled, snapping out of his trance. You're wrong. You need me, don't you? I asked coldly. Kiera. Alejandro warned. I knew he didn't want her to direct her wrath on me, but I didn't really care. She had hurt my mate far more than she ever should have. A mother is someone who fights the entire world for her children, not mentally abuses them as she had done. So, it was all lies. Marcel said quietly. Her look of surprise was one I would never forget. You? Her eyes snapped to me and she whispered something. Not this time. I said, letting my power out. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes, letting my senses spread to every corner of the room. I fueled all my anger, pain, and fury towards her for what she did to Alejandro, and I felt the flame ignite within me. What are you doing? She shouted. I opened my blazing eyes, just in time to see Alejandro lunge at her. No! I shouted. A black blast of power knocked him back, but he held his ground, pushing against her powerful force field. He shifted as his aura worked against her powers. The room was swirling with 3 different powers, each working to their full capacity. A battle of power and wills. If you will not side with me, then there's no use for you. I felt the surge of power within me growing, the shrieks of the Manangles and Wendigos reacting to my power filled my ears. My heart thumped as Marcel rushed towards Alejandro, shifting as he rammed against the wall assisting him. Look at that, the rogue mutt is helping his younger brother. Endora scoffed. Those words alone let the blast of power roll off me, knocking everyone to the ground. Her powers dissipated as I rushed towards her, my staff raised. If I were you, I'd save my mate. Endora hissed, whispering a spell. Her eyes glowed red. I turned my head, my heart pounding in fear as I saw her powers wrap around Alejandro so fast he didn't have time to react. He growled in rage as her power lashed into him, spearing him with 100 knife-like blades created from magic. His blood splattered everywhere as he crumbled to the floor, shifting back into his human form. Alejandro! I screamed, my voice ringing off the walls of the cavern. Kiera, fear consumed me like never before. My heart was pounding in my chest as I ran towards him. Marcel rushed past me, a deafening growl echoed in the room as he lunged at Andorra. I heard the sickening sound of a wolf being impaled. He howled before I heard a sickening crunch and then the smell of blood growing stronger in the air as his body hit the far wall. Not so fast! Andorra shouted. A dark blast shot towards me, but it didn't get past the blazing purple fire surrounding me. I felt her evil magic closing in on me, forcing me to stop in my tracks. I let my power blaze up once again, sending another blast towards her without even looking. The sound of some bones breaking and her screams filled the air. "Don't touch me!" I shrieked. I had made her mad, but I didn't care, I was angrier. She sent another strong wave at me which knocked me back, but I didn't hit the ground, a pair of strong arms catching me. Sparks shot up me at his touch and the strong smell of blood along with Alejandro's intoxicating scent surrounded me. "Leave her alone!" he growled. "You can't do anything." She laughed coldly. "Join me and she lives. In your dreams," he hissed. "As you wish," she said eerily, before 100 shards of black rushed towards us. "Baby, no!" I screamed the moment he wrapped his arms around me and jumped, but he wasn't fast enough. I flinched as I felt the impact of her brutal attack impaling him. "Run," he whispered softly in my ear. His hold became slack as he dropped to the floor. My heart was ringing in my ears, anger, fear, and panic were overtaking me. "You won't get away with this. He's meant to be your son," I shouted, rushing towards her only for another blast of magic to block me. I raised my staff, lunging straight through the darkness. I saw her eyes widen in shock as I leapt in the air, bringing my staff down. She blocked it with a shimmering red force field, but the anger and rage I felt were so much stronger. "No wolf can ever defeat me," she spat, smirking with confidence. "Unless she's blessed by the goddess herself," snapped back coldly. My blazing purple eyes glared into hers. The anger I felt within me terrified even myself. All I wanted to do was to kill the woman before me, for everything she put Alejandro through. Yes, I had hurt him. But this much? Channeling every ounce of anger and rage into pushing against the force field, I let it rush through me, satisfied when it cracked the shield and my staff slid right through straight into Andorra's shoulder. She gasped in pain as she was slammed to the ground. She spat, before she began chanting something, and I felt a darkness envelope the entire cavern. Despite my aura blazing around me, I couldn't see anything. It felt like thick black smoke was wrapped around me. "We will meet again. You will be mine, daughter of Selene," she hissed before I heard her run. I didn't have time to chase after her, I could hear both Alejandro's and Marcel's heartbeats fading. I rushed towards Alejandro's scent, falling to my knees. My heart was hammering in fear as I felt for him. The darkness slowly began to fade. My blazing aura vanished, leaving me in the darkness of the cavern. "No, no. Focus, Kia," I whispered shakily, as I tried to heal him. My hands were trembling as I willed all my power forth. "We will meet again." Andora's voice echoed eerily around the cavern, but I ignored it. My mind was completely focused on my love. "Please baby," I whispered, my heart pounding. I felt his heartbeat grow stronger and I let out a breath of relief. Feeling the pain leave his body, I reactivated my power, allowing the purple light to illuminate the area as I looked at Alejandro's body before me. His wounds were healing and I felt relieved. I caressed his face for a second, but as much as I wanted to stay by his side, I could feel Marcel's life draining away. I kissed his lips tenderly, letting my healing rush through me. I pulled away and never had anything felt so hard. Alejandro had lost enough family, I couldn't let him lose any more, not on my watch. I got up and rushed over to Marcel, who was back in human form. I placed my hand on his chest, wanting to heal him. My vision darkened just as I heard the hisses and growls of the beasts. My heart thumped as I heard them getting closer and closer towards us. Their unearthly sounds echoing off the walls and down the tunnels. Goddess! She had released them. I needed to hurry. Marcel grunted and I saw his eyes glow gold. My job was done, I stood up swaying. Alejandro! I turned, following my nose back towards him. Please wake up. His breathing was steady and I followed the sound. The shrieks were coming closer. Why was I so weak? Had I overused my abilities? I didn't know my limits yet, but fighting Andorra had taken a chunk out of me. I could hear the shrieks and growls of the approaching monsters. I turned towards the sound, I needed to protect him. My eyes flashed as I called my power forth. My aura blazed around me, but before I could do anything, a strong pair of arms wrapped around from behind, sending off sizzling sparks. I closed my eyes in relief. "You're okay," I whispered. "Thanks to you. Now let me handle it from here," he murmured huskily, placing a lingering kiss on my neck. I couldn't argue when my body felt like lead, my aura dissipate. "They are innocent wolves." Marcel's voice came, as Alejandro moved me behind him. "Created by her magic, that you were too blinded to see." Alejandro growled. "Do you blame me? When even you couldn't let fight her?" Marcel growled back. It seemed Raphael truly was the calmest of the brothers. "She can't help them right now because she healed us. We will have to kill them," Alejandro said quietly. I could sense the anguish from him. "Those things have been let loose. They are a danger to all of our kind. We need to stop this," Alejandro urged. "My men can help stop some. Only kill those that are necessary," Marcel replied reluctantly. "I don't take orders from a sick." "Alejandro, please," I whispered, reaching out for him. His hand closed around mine, kissing it tenderly before he scooped me up, and in a flash, I was placed in the corner. "Get your energy back, I can handle these," he said. I nodded as I smelt the rotting stench of a man-angle. It was good that the tunnel was narrow, only one or two could come in at a time. Closed my eyes, feeling extremely tired as Alejandro's aura swirled around us, a blanket of pure power. Alejandro, I was useless. She was so strong that even my speed wasn't enough. I hated that I brought Kiera here and hadn't even been able to protect her. I had never felt so powerless. Because of me, she could have been killed. Andora's words rang in my head. The cheek of her to think that I'd be okay with any of she was spewing. I guess I came across as more heartless than I actually was. Yeah, I was a monster, but I wasn't as far gone as she had thought. I frowned. For her to believe that, it meant she had been watching me for a long time. I didn't have time to wallow in self-pity. Marcel joined the fight, and I still had no clue what to make of that. They were never ending. Marcel had let off a call to his wolves and I sensed them approach. I had to admit, for just a bunch of rogues, he sure knew how to lead them. Guess he was a Rossi after all. I didn't know how to process that either, but when the time came, we'll deal with that. After all, he had tried to attack Andorra too. I had known instantly what Kiera was trying to do when she smoothly snuck around me. She was a queen who cared for everyone, and I trusted her decisions. After all, she could sense what I couldn't. I just hope we get out of this, barking orders. Bind and cage the ones you can. Those who can't, kill. The rogues went to do his bidding. I could see they were confused by the turn of events. I didn't bother leaving the vampires alive, those attacks were poisonous too. I don't know how long it took until they stopped coming, but by the time they did I was drenched in blood. Some were injured enough to be captured again, others I completely tore apart on the spot. My only aim was to get my woman out of here safely. I stepped back, feeling every bone in my body screaming for a break. I turned and walked over to Kiera, who seemed to have blacked out. Concern filled me as I scooped her into my arms. Her heart was steady and it looked like she's simply sleeping. I kissed her cleavage softly, inhaling her scent. I know you hate us. Marcel, or whatever he was called, spoke. I looked directly at him. He looked a lot rougher than Raphael. He had a few scars littering his torso. Marcel shifted in face, his hair fell to his shoulders and his eyes were the opposite of Raphael's, cold and calculating. Yeah, you got that right. If you ever had a issue with me, you could have come to see me. I said coldly. I've only ever killed rogues who have attacked. Many a time I've tried to extend the hand of peace to you. Oh yeah? I never got that then, but I get it now. It is clear that Mom had me completely blinded. We sent out many messages, even a plea to the Blood Moon Pact to help with the disease that was controlling us when we knew they had the Blessed Wolf. I'm not stupid, I realize now that she probably stopped those messages getting there. I want revenge. For everything she did to me, to us. He said, his voice rough and full of anger. I'm not sure if I can trust you. You can trust him. He isn't lying. Kiera's voice came and I looked down at her, my heart racing. Are you okay? I asked, pressing my forehead to hers. She smiled softly and nodded, kissing me sweetly as she wrapped her arms around my neck. I am, just feel tired. He isn't lying, Alejandro. He wants revenge and to help us. He genuinely cares for the rogues, just as you care for all werewolves. Her soft voice was like a pleasant song. So what now? Marcel asked. Now we leave here. Kiera said. I can't go, not yet. Many of those Wendigo are good men. I can't risk them all being killed. He said quietly. You do know she sent them after us plenty of times. I said, glaring at him. She said it'd get your attention, and yes, I was aware that my men were being sent to their deaths. A sacrifice I thought was for the greater good. He growled. At least he told the truth. Well, will you look at that? My men. You're a rogue, not an alpha. I growled. Yeah, I wasn't going to make this easy on him. Boys. Kiera said, now jumping out of my arms. Please. Calm down. Alejandro, you are the king. But he is also the alpha to the rogues, who wants to be a king. I taunted. If he wanted to be one, he should show me he's strong enough. A title doesn't make a king, Alejandro. You're the king, not because you're a Lycan, but because you fought and spent your life protecting the werewolf race. You stood and put our whole race in order so no wolf is abused. You are feared and respected. And even if you weren't those things, you'd still be my king. She whispered. I could see the emotions in her eyes, and I knew she thought she had lost me. I pulled her close, kissing her deeply. I would never die, because I didn't want her to go through that pain. For her, I would survive anything. She locked her arms around my neck, kissing me back with equal passion. Pleasure rushed through me and I was glad that the baggy pants I wore didn't tear completely when I had shifted. I could have kissed her for hours but that sick cleared his throat. Kiera blushed and moved back quickly. Ahem. As I was saying, to the rogues. Marcel is like a king too. She said, sounding flustered. She sure could be cute. If you want my help, then your so-called pack better be fully under your control. One wrong move and I won't hesitate to kill. I said. Our eyes met and I saw him clench his jaw. Fine. I want Andorra to pay. And my men to be treated and healed. That is all I ask. What do you want from us? Marcel said. Well, you sure talk like an alpha. I have 3 rules. Break even 1 and you're out. First, the truth. No matter what it is, I want the full truth. Anything you know, anything Andorra's said or done. I want to know it all. Secondly, if any of your wolves decide to disrespect me, they're dead. And lastly, when the time comes to face Andorra, we fight as one. I looked at him, watching carefully for even a sign of a lie, but he simply nodded. You have my word. He said quietly. I smirked coldly. Good, he at least knew who the ultimate alpha was. I now glared at him. My eyes flashed red as I remembered something from earlier, where he had mentioned Kiera. Oh, and one more thing. This isn't a rule, it's a threat. Come anywhere near my girl and I'll tear you to shreds. Kiera, despite his threat to his brother, his words sent a rush of emotions through me. My heart was pounding as he pulled me into his arms possessively. I simply closed my eyes and wrapped my arms around his waist. I only wanted her for her power, as Mom wanted. It's nothing personal. Now that I know she was lying, I can guarantee I don't want your mate. She seems to be young enough to be my daughter. Marcel shot back. Alejandro growled and I pulled away, trying to calm him down. I was glad that a few rogues had brought in some extra lanterns so I could see a lot better. It's fine. Come on, we need to think of a plan of action, I said, kissing Alejandro's chest as he glared at his brother. You should rest, my wolves will keep watch, Marcel said quietly. Like I would trust you that much. Alejandro shot back. We should head back first, he frowned deeply, looking at me, and I knew he was worried about me. I think I'd like to stay. Once I'm rested, in the morning I can help heal the Wendigos, I added thoughtfully. Alejandro's frown deepened, he seemed lost in thought and I could feel his hesitation before he nodded. Fine. Thanks, Marcel said. I will have someone show you a room, and give you clothes. After that, let's eat. It is late. Thank you, I said before Alejandro could even speak. We'd like that. At least one of you is sane, Marcel muttered. Yeah well, at least I'm not a loser like you, Alejandro shot back. Both brothers glared at each other and I sighed. It seems like it was in their blood to have such big egos. Once we were shown to a room and given clothes, we were left alone. The moment the door shut, Alejandro was in front of me, removing the necklace from around my neck. He crouched down, resting his head against my stomach. My heart thundered at his move. He must have been worried. We are fine, I whispered. I knew for a fact our bodies could take more than that, and I hadn't felt any pain or cramping. I ran my fingers through his hair as his lips fleetingly brushed my stomach. Even though the fabric of my top, I felt the pleasant tingle rush through me. I know, he said, clenching his jaw as he stood up, not able to look me directly in the eye. I knew it was because he didn't want to show his concern. You were worried about our pup, I whispered. Not really, he denied, still not looking me in the eye. I raised an eyebrow, smiling slightly. I felt all warm and happy with his concern. Really? So, the moment we are alone, you rush to hear the heartbeat, simply because you wanted to and not because you cared. I teased as he slipped the necklace back around my neck. Maybe a little. Don't annoy me, sweetheart, he said, pulling me close. I smirked. I kind of can if I want, and you wouldn't be able to stop me, I taunted. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure, he said, with a small cold smirk. Okay, I do not trust him at all. Well, let's get changed, I said, looking around the cavern room. It was more of an actual room than just a dingy cave. Although it was barely furnished, I could see that it was well kept. There was a large double bed to one side, with 3 lanterns hanging around the room. It seemed they didn't have much access to actual technology. There were 2 more lights on the far corner, ones that were created by magic. There were 2 small drawers and a chair standing to the side. I picked up the clothes that were left on the bed for us and began stripping out of what I was wearing. I felt his gaze on me and my heart pounded, knowing I was tempting him. I wanted him, but I turned towards him just in time to see he had turned away, his jaw clenched as he began getting dressed, tossing aside his torn pants. I pulled on the long-sleeved black shirt and denim pants that were rather loose on my waist, but they would do the job. We had barely finished when there was a knock on the door. Alejandro growled as I walked over, about to open it when he got there first, moving me protectively behind him. I sighed. Did he really not trust Marcel? At the door was a young wolf. He barely looked much older than 15. Despite how slim he was, I could see the muscles under his worn-out shirt. "Dinner is ready," he said, looking down under Alejandro's intense glare. "Lead the way," Alejandro said coldly. I took his hand in mine, hoping he and Marcel didn't start attacking each other. "What's your name?" I asked the boy. "Mine," he asked, sounding surprised as he led us through the dark halls. Only Alejandro's lead was guiding me. "Yet, who else?" Alejandro added. "Eric," he said. "Nice name," I said. I could feel the tension and anger rolling off Alejandro. I knew playing nice wasn't in him. I knew this was not his style. Alejandro was the type to work alone and not trust anyone or rely on anyone for help. But I knew to defeat Andorra we needed a united team. I knew he had listened to me because I wanted to stay and help the Wendigos. "Thank you," Eric said quietly. Soon I saw light ahead and the smell of freshly cooked soup, with plenty of vegetables, filled my nose. I inhaled deeply and heard my stomach grumble, making me blush. I was starved. We stepped inside and all eyes turned to us. There was a mix of men and women. One thing they had in common were their lean bodies, each littered with many scars. The women all had hair down to their shoulders or shorter. There was not one item of jewelry on any of them and I wondered just how hard their life had been. "Come," Marcel said, sitting at one of the long tables. Alejandro and I walked hand in hand. His power rolled off him, making every wolf we passed lower their heads in submission to their rightful king. "It's a simple meal, but it should be filling. We don't really have many options," Marcel said. "Thank you," I said sitting down. Once the food was served I picked up my spoon, looking forward to the meal, but before I could eat anything Alejandro had sniffed my bowl and had a taste, finally placing it down in front of me. I shook my head. Did he really still not trust Marcel? I guess, unlike me, he found it harder. "So, how long did you know that Kiera could help with the Wendigos?" Alejandro asked coldly. 4 years. She said we needed to get her, or we would all lose our loved ones, Marcel said, now slowly swirling his soup in his bowl. The look of anguish that flitted through his eyes was enough to capture my curiosity. He looked down, taking a deep breath. "We lost countless people. I traveled far and wide trying to get rogues to join me on this cause, but even then, I refused to just attack packs when all we wanted was help. That was until I became desperate. My mate. She was from a pack down near London, but she ran away from her pack for me," Marcel said. My eyes stung with tears, feeling his pain. He had lost her. I knew it before he even spoke. She was perfect, but yet, she became one of those things, and right to the end, I just wanted a way to fix it. I even left here myself to beg the Alpha of the Blood Moon Pack for help. But I wasn't even allowed past pack borders. She died right here in a cell and I couldn't do. The pain he felt for his mate was palpable and I felt an ache inside. Just imagining losing your loved one. Going through that terrified me. That should have been your first alarm signal, Alejandro said coldly. The fact they let you live and not your men. If any pack let you just go back, didn't you find that strange? I was beaten. But no. It never crossed my mind. Just the pain I felt and the cold treatment we received. I know enough about witchcraft to know that she probably put some spells on you or made you see something that didn't happen. Do you know how these Wendigos are made? Alejandro asked coldly. Marcel didn't reply. By being fed other rogues, cannibalism at its finest. She probably staged certain wolves' deaths, but really, she was feeding it to selected wolves right within these walls. Your mate's dead, because of that Endora. Alejandro's voice was cold and emotionless. Yet I knew every wolf here who was listening felt the anger and power that emanated with every word. I knew they didn't like us. After all their lives they had been told we were the enemy. As silence fell, I saw Marcel look sick. Snapping his spoon as he tossed it onto the table in anger, his eyes blazing gold. That! He growled. Dad! Our eyes snapped to a boy with blue eyes and dark brown hair. He was barely 10 years old, but I could see the slight similarity to his dad. Leo, why are you here? Marcel said coldly. I have news. He said quietly. So, you have a kid? Alejandro said, with his head tilted. The boy looked back at him defiantly, before looking down. What is it? Marcel snapped. She's gone. I don't know if it was Grandma, Leo said. I saw Marcel's eaves widen, a frown on his face. He growled. I exchanged looks with Alejandro, who looked as confused as I felt. Who escaped? He asked Marcel. It's not important. Let's just say she's trouble. Maybe it is for the best. Leave it. For all we know, she may just have been another of Endora's victims. He said, frowning. Leo nodded as he walked out again. You have a 10-year-old carrying orders? Alejandro asked, raising an eyebrow. He's 9 actually, and yes. He needs to pull his weight. Marcel said. For once, Alejandro didn't say much, simply nodding and shrugging. Then again, maybe I was wrong. He should be in school. He said moodily. Marcel sat back. Care to share how we could have attained that when we are killed on sight? He asked coldly. Made to think that? Alejandro growled. I've never put that rule down. Fine. I get it. Marcel snapped back. I ignored them. It seemed they were planning to be at each other's throats often enough, so I will leave them to it. Oh, this soup was really good. I was feeling much more energized. Tomorrow we clear out this place. Her magic lingers and it isn't safe. You all can set up camp close to my pack grounds. If Endora plans to make a move, I have a feeling it will be a big attack. We need to be ready. Alejandro said, now lacing his arm around my shoulders and kissing my forehead before he finished his soup by drinking it down in one go. Understood. Marcel said. Oh, and I'm sure Raphael would love to meet you. Alejandro said mockingly. Raphael, he replied, frowning. Your twin? I said. He nodded. I doubt he'd want to meet me, and I don't really care for family reunions. Marcel said curtly. But I knew he was just unsure. Oh yeah? Well, Raphael will probably love it. Alejandro said. If he's anything like you, he isn't. Raphael is really sweet and kind. I interrupted with a smile. Alejandro raised an eyebrow as he looked down at me. Oh yeah. Yes, and you know it. I said, with a pointed look. Well, let's call it a night, Alejandro said quietly as he stood up. I didn't miss his gaze lingering on me. Marcel nodded as Alejandro placed his arm around my waist, glaring at a few male wolves who had glanced towards me. His menacing growl had them all lowering their heads in submission. I resisted a smile, leaning against him as he led me out of the hall. The second we were in the dark, he scooped me up bridal style, making me gasp. Alejandro! I exclaimed startled. His reply was a soft kiss to my neck before he inhaled my scent. This is hard, he muttered. I knew what he meant, but I said nothing, simply wrapping my arms around him tightly. We reached the room and he locked the door behind us, easily carrying me with one arm before he walked over to the bed and placed me down. Best get some rest, he said, his eyes meeting mine. My heart pounded as I held on to him tightly, slowly pulling him on top of me. His eyes flashed red and I could feel his struggle. Just kiss me, I whispered, looking into his blazing red eyes. He didn't say anything as he pushed me back onto the bed, gripping my wrists as his lips crashed against mine. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.